Hey guys, so it's me, Nicolette Mashile, and today I want to talk a little bit about how to improve your credit score, practical ways in which you can actually get yourself a better credit rating. But remember that none of my videos constitute as financial advice. If you are looking for financial advice, please speak to somebody who is certified and registered with the FSCA. So a lot of people keep asking me, Nicolette, you talk about us getting access to our credit reports. We've gotten our credit reports now, but our credit scores are shocking. So how does it work? How can I actually improve my credit score? So the best news is the fact that you actually can improve your credit score. So it's not something that you need to even dwell about, because there are small things that you can start doing that will really change your credit score. But I think the other thing is that people are a little confused about that actual score. And a lot of people ask this question about what is an actual good score. Well, that is a bit difficult to actually say. Obviously, the higher your score, the better it might look. But that does not necessarily mean that you are going to be granted a approval when it comes to your credit application, because as I've said in a different video, your credit assessment when it comes to credit application from credit providers is also dependent on their own credit assessment risk criteria. So you might find that you've got a really great credit score, but it could mean that you are already credit committed to too many things. And although you've got a great credit score, you might not get a credit approval from a certain credit provider. So these are some of the things that you need to start understanding. But I think when I start talking about the things that you can do to be able to get a better credit score, you will start to see why and what is important on your credit report for it to read like a symphony. But before I get into some of the things that you can do to improve your credit score, it is of utmost importance for me to say why having a good credit record is really important. The reality is, in South Africa, most of us will not be able to make the big purchases without obtaining some level of credit, right? So if you really want to buy yourself a house, if you want to buy yourself a car, not all of us have access to being able to save 200, 300,000 rand for you to be able to buy a house or even a stand to start building a house. So credit does form part of our lives. Yes, cash is possible and cash is probably the best way, but the reality is that there are those people like us who are going to need to use credit at some point in our lives. And if you use credit very well, you're able to start acquiring assets to a point where you can get assets that are going to push out some level of passive income, and you might never need credit ever again. How awesome is that? So that's the first thing that we need to put on the side. The second thing that's important for you to understand is that keeping a good credit record is not just so that you can get a credit approval. So if you want to buy a car and they say, yes, your credit has been approved, that's not the only reason why you keep a good credit score. You also keep a good credit score or a good rating so that you can get competitive rates. Because getting credit is not where the journey starts or ends. Getting a good interest rate, that's now the real deal. That's where you actually win. Where the prime lending rate for commercial banks is 10 point whatever it is. I think it's 10.5 or 10.25. I stand to be corrected. I don't know, because really I am just running around like a headless chicken. Getting something lower than the prime rate is exceptionally well, because it means that you're going to pay less when it comes to interest that is going to be charged on whatever credit account that you've got. So your biggest win is really to get competitive rates and be able to have that negotiating power. So let's get into some of the things that you can do today to improve your credit score. The first one you need to understand is that your credit score is made up of your credit account management. How do you manage credit? So how do you manage that clothing account, that personal loan that you've got, that home loan that you've got, and that car loan that you've got? How are you managing it? And the one thing you need to remember is that it's not just about paying. So if you say, for instance, your car installment is due on the 28th and it's 3,000 Rand, and you pay even 4,000 Rand on the first of the month, the next month, you are still going to get a knock in terms of your credit score, because you've made a late payment. So it's important to remember that even though you are making payments, the payments need to actually come on time. And when they do not, and you can see that they're not going to come on time, Pick up the phone and speak to your credit provider, because what a lot of us love to do is to pretend like it's not happening and it's going to go away. Well, it's not. By the time you've picked up the phone to be able to explain, they have not had enough opportunity for them to go and report to the credit bureaus that your Unicolette is not going to pay this month. At least you are going to put in what is called a payment plan, and then they don't need to go and report to those guys to say you have not paid. So please make sure that you do actually pay the minimum amount and you pay it on time. That's the first thing. The second thing that you need to do is to make sure you do not have too many hard inquiries. I know we all love to sit on, especially on car websites where they sell cars, and you want to see whether or not you can afford a certain car. And there you are playing around with the numbers, and you eventually get to the point where they say to you, do you consent to a credit check? Make sure that you do not actually consent to it if you have no intention of getting credit to buy a car. Why is that? Because if you do too many of those inquiries, you start to look like somebody who is desperate for credit and who's constantly looking for credit. That is why it's so important for you not to just consent when it comes to those kind of inquiries. Remember, there are two types of inquiries. There are what we call hard inquiries and soft inquiries. A soft inquiry is when you yourself go and look for your credit report. That is called a soft inquiry. Or when a company with the purpose of giving you a job goes and looks for your credit report, that is seen as a soft inquiry, and that will not have a knock on your credit score. But when a company, especially a credit provider, is looking for your credit score or your credit report for the purpose of assessing a credit application, then, my friend, your credit score is going to get a knock. And that is what we talk about when we talk about too many hard inquiries. The third thing that you need to be looking out for in terms of improving your credit score is having a different or a mix of credit types. What are credit types? So basically, there are different types of credit types. There's long-term credit and then there's short-term credit, right? So long-term credit, then there's also secured credit and unsecured credit. So secured credit would be things like getting credit for things like a home or for a car, because there's an asset that is supporting the credit application or whatever that you're actually going to be buying, right? So that would be secured. Unsecured would be things like credit cards, with things like personal loans and all those kind of things. The other way in which you can look at it is that there's long-term credit and then there's short-term credit. So your long-term credit would be things like a home loan, and then your short-term credit would be things like getting a personal loan and those kind of things. So you need to have a good mix of credit types for them to be able to assess whether or not you are good at managing different types of credit, right? Then the fourth thing, I think I am at number 4, if I'm not, whatever. The fourth thing that you need to be making sure is that it's, getting your credit score improved is almost similar to getting a good CV. So the longer you've held a job, you kind of first top priority to getting a job. It's the same thing when it comes to credit. So the longer you've held a credit account, which you've managed well, it means that they feel like they can trust you with credit. So that's basically what it is. So you need to hold a certain account for long so that there is sufficient proof that you actually know how to manage credit. That's literally what it is. And then the last but not least thing is that you actually need credit to be able to have a credit score. Why? Because your credit score is made up of your credit behavior. Now we cannot, or they cannot, I love how I say we because I am part of the financial services sector, they cannot assess your credit rating or your credit behavior if you've never had credit. So I know a lot of people argue, why must you get credit to get credit? Yeah, it's one of those, if you want to be a medical doctor, you've got to be a doctor at some point. I know it's not the same thing. I know, don't eat me up, but that's literally how the credit system works. So guys, the most important thing to remember is that you are in control. You are certainly in control of turning that thing around. And remember, if you do have judgments or defaults, make sure that you actually settle them and just get a paid up letter from whoever your credit provider is. The other thing that you need to also remember is that the reason, see, we all want to demonize people that work in the credit bureaus, but they are not there. They are not actually the demon, and neither are the people at the credit providers. These people are actually doing a job for each other. So, The credit provider basically will take your information and how you manage your credit and will report it to the credit bureau. And then the credit bureau will put together a report based on information that these ones have given to them. So that's literally what it is. And you might find sometimes that there's an account that is not on the ClearScore credit report. It sometimes would just mean that maybe the credit provider hasn't reported to ClearScore yet about that account, and it's okay for you to query. The most important thing is that when you open your credit report, you need to be able to see credit accounts that you recognize. If you don't recognize them, then there is a serious problem, because then that means that there's some sort of identity theft, and you now need to make sure that you actually query those types of mistakes. So you can just pick up the phone, or you can send an email to your credit bureau and say, guys, I would like to lodge a dispute on a certain credit account. You then need to give them the right documents. Sometimes they'll ask you for an affidavit. Sometimes they'll just ask you for your ID. It depends on what supporting documents they're going to ask you for. You submit those, and Bob's your uncle. It should be fixed if it is indeed an error. I mean, I, for the longest of time, on my credit report, have been called Mr. Mashile. Now, I don't know where there is a Mr. Nicolette Mashile, but whatever. Clearly, it exists in some world, but it was clear to me that I am a Miss Mashile, and all I had to do was to submit my ID documents, and they will realize that I'm actually a girl. I know I don't act like a girl, but I am a girl. So yeah, guys, if you haven't accessed your credit report, I'm going to leave a link in the caption. Please access your credit report. It is so important for you to actually know what's happening in your credit world. Mwah.